History of a Teacher by Famous Vault. Chapter 10. The Inspection. Thursday arrived sooner than Yugi had hoped it would, and he was being unusually clumsy due to nervousness. Atem did fruitless attempts to calm Yugi. "It'll be fine. As you told Madame Hooch, we've got enough tricks up our sleeves." "You can have enough tricks on your sleeve. I can do nothing at all," Yugi said, sounding angrier than he intended. "And really, what would you do?" "I'd challenge her," Atem said soberly. He sat on one of the chairs that stood around the wooden round table in spirit form and was eyeing Yugi as the Japanese took on his pants inside out. "Challenge who?" a squeaky voice wondered. "Dobby!" Yugi called out, surprised, as he took his pants off and turned them right. "Oh, no one of importance." Yugi didn't understand house elves, and he had accepted the fact that he most likely never would. Yet it was interesting to see how attached a house elf could become if you treated him as an equal. After the event at the office of the Daily Prophet, Dabi had become Yugi's personal spy. He kept an eye and ear out and reported everything he found important to Yugi and Atem. Dabi was eager to assist Yugi in any way he could to help him beat their common enemy, Lucius Malfoy. He had been touched by how Yugi had stood up to the man for the house elves' sake, and he felt the need to repay Yugi for that. Yugi did not bother to be annoyed by the elf's rather unpleasant intrusion. He had decided not to complain as long as the house elf didn't appear in the bathroom. To be entirely honest, Yugi enjoyed the elf's what seemed to become daily morning visits. The weird hats, the earrings, and the elf's happy chatter always made Yugi smile. "Aren't you supposed to help the other elves with breakfast?" Dobby shook his head. His caps were close to slipping off his head. "No, too many elves for tasks! Dobby has loads of spare time! All he ever does is clean the Gryffindor common room and Professor Murtaugh's room!" "Is that so?" Yugi smiled as he fetched a white shirt and buttoned it. "So, what did you come to tell me?" "A lot of complaints has been made about Professor Umbridge's way of teaching!" Dobby started and sat down on the bed. "No surprise there," Yugi said, and the nervousness that Dabi had driven away just a moment ago returned at full strength. "I suppose that in times like these, defense against the dark arts is important, and I'm sure that someone working on behalf of the Ministry would refuse to teach things properly. I wonder if they fear that Dumbledore would make the students fight for him. Something they must fear, and it clearly isn't Voldemort." "Well, Dobby doesn't know about the Ministry, sir, but Dobby does know that defense against the dark arts is important. The students think so too. They want to learn it themselves. Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley want Harry Potter to teach the students how to defend themselves when the war begins." "Is he suited to do so?" Atem asked Dobby curiously and stood up. Dobby, who still was slightly afraid of Atem, despite their common conversations, winced a bit as the mighty air of the former pharaoh seemed to fill the room. Yugi never noticed that because he was used to Atem, but a room always seemed smaller when the ancient spirit showed up. It was a good thing that the only ones who ever noticed Atem were the house elves. Yugi caught himself wondering why the house elves could see the ancient spirit. Dobby shook the fear that he knew to be irrelevant off himself and nodded fiercely. "Oh, yes! Harry Potter saved many people in his second year when he beat the basilisk that attacked students in this castle. He saved Ginny Weasley. The basilisk was a part of you-know-who's plan to resurrect himself. He was really great, and last year he won the Triwizard Tournament and fought you-know-who himself." "So he's good at defense against the dark arts. What did he think about the idea?" Atem wondered. "He seemed to think it was a bad idea. He says it was a luck, but Dobby knows better." "It can't be worse than Umbridge," Atem stated. "I don't think it's a bad idea. It'd be good for Rebecca too. She knows nothing at all." "Let's just hope it plays out well. Let's get some breakfast," Yugi said and put on his shoes. They came late for breakfast, and Umbridge was standing in the doorway towards the great hall waiting for him. "You're late," she stated, displeased. "Yeah, I know. I had a very giving conversation this morning, and anyway, it's only breakfast." "Breakfast has no tight schedule, has it?" Yugi said as he hopped around on one foot in an attempt to close the zipper on his right shoe that had broken down. "A conversation with whom, might I ask?" Umbridge asked with a sugar-sweet voice. Yugi relinquished his attempts to close the zipper on his shoe and looked up at Umbridge. He hated the fact that he actually had to look up. "With a house elf, actually." "What about?" Umbridge asked, clearly determined to find out every last detail. "Nothing of importance. We talked a bit about making breakfast, the amount of house elves in the castle, and what tasks he did, and what he did in his spare time." Yugi chuckled. "We didn't talk about his spare time." "No, Oh, but I just want to see her reaction on spare time. House elves aren't really supposed to have such a thing, Yugi said, doing his best to hold back a smile. I figured. Looks like you hit home. Yugi focused on Umbridge again and was surprised by her expression. She came closer to Yugi and he quickly took some steps backwards as she pointed a finger at him. Did you say spare time? Well, yes, Yugi replied, uncertain, regretting his little prank. House elves aren't supposed to have spare time. They are filthy servants. All they are good for is serving wizards and witches up from good families. They have no rights. They must be loyal to the house they serve. Umbridge was nearly purple in the face with anger. He's a free elf. Dumbledore offered him a job. Yugi said, nearly panicked. He had no idea what to say. He gets paid? Umbridge's voice reached a very unpleasant high pitch. I suppose so, Yugi said, backing several steps again and bumped into an armchair. This is unacceptable, she bellowed, having completely forgotten about Yugi. I think it sounds humane, Yugi suggested quietly, as Atem yelled at him to keep quiet, just a bit too late. Umbridge stared at Yugi a couple of seconds, as if in very deep thought. Then she suddenly turned around and stormed into the Great Hall. Yugi took a very deep breath and let the air escape slowly. No more jokes. That sounds like a wise decision, Potter, Atem remarked, being just as astonished as Yugi. In moments like this, I envy you. They never yelled at you, Yugi complained. Atem just laughed. Then he sighed. Don't envy me. I'd like to have people yelling at me. It'd mean that they'd known that I was here. Yugi knew that what he said had been slightly insensitive, but decided to do an attempt to lighten the suddenly dark mood. I'll ask Rebecca or Navi to yell at you. Atem burst out laughing. Both of them have yelled at me more than enough. One of them more justified than the other. What was wrong with her? Madame Hooch asked as she entered the teacher's lounge from the Great Hall. The short Japanese smiled weakly. I told her that there are paid free elves working at Hogwarts and that I thought it was humane. Madame Hooch buried her face in one hand and stated, You obviously don't know who Dolores Jane Umbridge is. A while ago, she held a fierce campaign against werewolves, frightening people with them. We had a werewolf teacher here 2 years ago, Professor Remus Lupin. He was just a normal guy, really friendly, only a bit scabby. He disappeared once a month. He and Professor Dumbledore made sure to have him someplace safe so he wouldn't harm the students, but he had all faith in Remus. He's the best defense against the dark arts teacher the school's seen in a long time. Did wonders with the students. He taught them successfully how to get rid of a boggart. I'm sure he can't find a job now anymore due to that toad. Werewolves? Yugi wondered, incredulous. Seriously? Madame Hooch laughed. I forgot that you're new to this. Yeah, werewolves. There is a lot of prejudice against them, but they're regular people most of the time. Some werewolves are actually bloodthirsty killers, but they never apply for a job, so I don't get Dolores' problem. Anyway, she doesn't like half-breeds or creatures with near-human intelligence. Usually they are a lot smarter than us, but trying to tell the ministry that. Like house elves? Yugi wondered. Yeah, house elves, but also centaurs and merpeople. I won't ask, Yugi sighed. Werewolves are enough for one day. You're coping quite well for a newbie, Madame Hooch said and smiled at him. Oh well, I chose it. Then you have no right not to. Madame Hooch chose not to comment, but her opinion was clear. She thought him brave and strong, and Yugi disagreed. Well, I wish you luck with her today. Don't do anything stupid, and don't mention werewolves or house elves. Rebecca met her first friend at the castle Thursday during lunch. As usual, she was eating alone. She had a book next to her, which she read while eating her soup. She found Hogwarts a History to be very interesting, even though she hadn't even finished the first chapter yet. Every now and then she waved her wand and said, Loomis. She was determined to learn the spell before the end of the weekend. Having any luck? A brown-haired, freckle-waving Law asked. He went to the same class as Rebecca, but just like everyone else, he hadn't approached her at all. She knew his name to be Peter. What? She wondered coldly and glared at him in the most hostile way she could imagine. Was with attitude, he wondered and sat down opposite her. Rebecca had to admit that he was brave, though he couldn't entirely hide the fact that he was nervous. I've been ignored completely for well over a week. Why the sudden approach? She wondered, smiling innocently, but with a sharp glimmer in her eyes. Actually, I want to warn you. You are Muggle-born, aren't you? He wondered, curiously, looking around to make sure they weren't overheard. I have no idea what that even means, she answered and leaned backwards a bit. Exactly, Muggle-borns are people with non-magical parents. It's very important to know whether you are or aren't Muggle-born nowadays. Why is that? Rebecca wondered suspiciously. She was well aware that she, in fact, was Muggle-born, but she couldn't see why that mattered. The rumors, the Death Eaters... Peter clearly couldn't find words to express what he desired to say. Death Eaters? Rebecca wondered, recalling her conversation with Yugi. Aren't they dangerous? Somewhere deep inside her, an uncontrollable fury was burning. These Death Eaters had killed the best friend she had ever had, and she'd make them pay for it. Oh yeah, they definitely are. The Death Eaters are loyal to he who must not be named, an evil wizard that died 15 years ago. Though some people are saying, people like Dumbledore, that he is back. Harry Potter claims he's fought you-know-who last year. One student died. No one knows what happened, though. Peter talked lower and lower the further he came in his explanation. He who must not be named is extremely powerful, and if he's back, that would mean warfare. The Ministry refuses to believe that they are telling the truth and call Harry and Dumbledore for liars. You really don't know about this? Rebecca shook her head. Not at all. Professor Muto said that it wasn't safe for either him nor me, but he didn't explain further. That is one of the reasons everyone avoids you. It's weird that you are on such familiar terms with a teacher, Peter stated. Oh, come on. I was 8 when I met him, and he was in high school. He practically is my best friend. He was away for a very long time. I've missed him. Hadn't it been for an entire class gaping at me, I'd have hugged him. She joked and laughed, despite herself. Really? Peter wondered, staring at her with a rather odd expression. Of course. Professor Muto, I can barely say that. Will never be a teacher to me, that's that alone. Had anyone suggested to me that Yugi was capable of teaching 2 weeks ago, I'd have laughed them straight in the face, she said, and couldn't stop laughing at Peter's expression. But clearly he's good at it. Unbelievable. Peter started to laugh a little uncertain, affected by the unstoppable laughter of the blonde girl in front of him. So that's it? Old friends then? Peter said to get confirmation. Yeah, something like that, Rebecca answered, and got another fit of laughs at Peter's horrified expression. What do you mean, something like that? He wondered suspiciously. Rebecca stared at him, disbelieving when she understood what he meant. No, nothing like that. He's no freaking lolicon, Rebecca said, offended. I won't deny I had a crush on him up until the age of 10, but really, no way. You had a crush on him? Peter asked, feeling terribly misplaced. Oh yeah, a severe one. But that's long gone, Rebecca assured him, and had another fit of laughter at his expression. He didn't say anything, and his gaze had entirely spaced out. Rebecca wasn't sure if she wanted to know what he was thinking about. So, what have the Death Eaters to do with Muggleborns? She asked, after she stopped laughing. What? Right, Peter said, as his gaze regained focus. The slight smile on his lips disappeared completely and changed into an expression of grim seriousness. Voldemort deemed pure-blooded wizards to be better than everyone else, deemed Muggleborns unworthy of life, and thought that Muggles were to serve wizards. In the war that started 20 years ago, Muggleborns like me were hunted everywhere, and either killed or sent to Azkaban, a terrible prison. You-know-who and his Death Eaters took control over the Ministry and nearly everything else. The only one who must not be named was afraid of was Dumbledore, since Dumbledore is one of the mightiest wizards around. What happened to him? Rebecca wondered, a sickening feeling getting a firm grip over her stomach. She pushed the soup out of reach, feeling ill simply by the smell of it. He who must not be named died when he tried to kill the toddler, Peter said, and held up a hand at Rebecca's incredulous expression. Let me continue. You-know-who and his Death Eaters kill by using the killing curse. It's not really certain what happens when you are hit by that curse. Only thing for certain is that you die on the spot. When you-know-who tried to kill that toddler, the spell bounced back on him and killed him. At least, that is what is said. No one knows what happened to he who must not be named. Why wasn't the toddler killed? And why don't you say his name? It sounds silly, Rebecca questioned, and awaited the answer, interested. I don't know why Harry didn't die. I suppose that there are people that do, but I don't, Peter said solemnly. Then perhaps I'd know what to believe. Harry, you say? The same one that claims to have fought the man you refused to name? Rebecca asked with a frown. She knew how this was going to turn out already. She had enough of experience with these kinds of fights not to see the pattern. One that was repeating now, too. Yeah, the one and the same, Peter confirmed, and Rebecca sighed. As for the name, we don't speak it. I don't really know why, really. It's just... He shuddered. At least tell me, Rebecca pleaded. I want to know, please. Peter thought deeply a while, and eventually he made a decision. I'll write it down for you. With small letters, he wrote down Voldemort. Voldemort? Rebecca asked. Shh! Peter whispered and winced. Don't speak his name! But does Professor Muto think that he's back? Rebecca thought a while before she nodded. Yeah, I think so. I can at least assure you that the Death Eaters are active. Sirius Black is opposed. It said that he'll be the one to shoulder you-know-whose work and continue the work that he who must not be named started. Who's Sirius Black? Rebecca wondered. A mass murderer that escaped Azkaban 2 years ago. He's probably the most wanted man in Great Britain. I hope he'll be caught, or better, killed soon. It's no good to have the only man who knows how to escape Azkaban on free foot, Peter stated and shuddered again. Rebecca looked up and saw that Peter received a mean glare from Ginny Weasley, who just passed by as Peter explained who Sirius Black was. He doesn't sound like a very nice person, Rebecca replied to satisfy Peter, but she wasn't convinced. Ginny's expression had been one of powerlessness, sorrow, and anger, the expression of someone who knew the truth but wasn't allowed to tell. Yugi had worn an expression a bit alike when Rebecca demanded information from him. Would you excuse me? It just hit me that I have something to do. She gave him the most convincing smile she could manage and stood up. Nice meeting you. Rebecca grabbed her copy of Hogwarts History and hurried off after Ginny. Ginny had left the Great Hall and went up the stairs towards Gryffindor Tower. Ginny! Rebecca called out after her. The red-haired girl turned around, surprised, and looked disturbed. What is it? Rebecca grabbed Ginny's hand and pulled her into a hallway that people rarely used, so they would be able to talk without being overheard. Ginny protested, but Rebecca ignored her. About Sirius Black, what do you know that no one else does? Rebecca asked bluntly. She didn't feel like dancing around the point. What makes you think I know anything about that murderer? Ginny asked, and acted very convincing. She actually sounded disgusted, but Rebecca didn't think that the feeling was genuine. That look you gave Peter when he told me about Sirius Black was unmistakable. I've seen it before. You know more than you dare or are allowed to tell. If what he said wasn't true, then I want to know, Rebecca said anxiously. Why would you doubt his words? Ginny said, still acting convincingly. Personal experience, and since I was thrown into this very unexpected, I haven't been as much affected by the propaganda of the Daily Prophet. People are dying, and they are denying it, Rebecca said. She was upset and didn't mind showing it. How do you know that people are dying? Who said that? Ginny asked, cornering Rebecca with her own words. Rebecca didn't answer but looked away. Understanding dawned upon Ginny. Oh no, someone you knew? Rebecca knew she had worked herself into a tight spot, and Rebecca had her own personal way of dealing with such kinds of things. She used the same method when she was angry or sad as when cornered. She'd used the method on a Tim, who had been fairly unaffected at the time, but Rebecca was stronger and taller now, so Ginny would be sure to notice. Rebecca pulled her hand back, clenched her fist, and punched Ginny straight in the face. Then she ran as fast as she could. She scolded herself for not being more careful. Here, people wouldn't try to explain all the unbelievable aware. On the contrary, Ginny was laying on the ground, covering her nose, which was bleeding terribly. She wasn't angry. She understood that it was indeed someone who Rebecca had cared about that had died by the hands of a Death Eater. Ginny sighed and stood up. She at least appreciated the fact that someone gave Sirius the benefit of the doubt. Yugi had been too nervous to eat either breakfast or lunch, and as he awaited the arrival of the 5th years and Umbridge, he had a stomachache that wouldn't aid him in any way. He heard stumbling outside the classroom and went to open the doors. As he held a hand on each doorknob, he sighed. Well, here goes nothing. I'm on your side, Atem said in means of calming Yugi, and Yugi was calmed. He could do anything with his dark other at his side. It had been a while since he had that thought, and it made him smile. He opened the doors wide and walked towards his desk as the students flooded into the classroom and took their respective places. Yugi was pleased to see that Dean Thomas and Tracy Davis still went to sit next to each other. They were talking and laughing, ignoring the stares from the other students. I wish we saw that more often, Atem stated, and Yugi's smile broadened, only to disappear as Dolores Umbridge entered the classroom. She walked all the way past Yugi and stole the chair behind his desk. She dragged it to a corner and sat down. She turned half in her seat to observe the hieroglyphics on the wall. All right, last Monday I covered a part that is very important but doesn't quite explain how the Second World War started. Adolf Hitler was a mere politician and a former soldier after the First World War. After a while, he started his own political party called NSDAP, which is short for National Socialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. They were at first a very small party, but due to the circumstances in the country, they grew fast. Eventually, Hitler became head of government, and when President Hindenburg died, he made himself Führer. After World War I, the German people were scattered all over Europa, and Hitler wanted to bring them back to Germany, but by widening the German borders rather than making them move back. High-pitched voice, interrupted Yugi. Yugi decided not to tempt fate and went quite obediently. Yes? Is this what you usually teach the students? She wondered, standing as if she deemed herself a whole lot superior. Yes, you teach history in order to make people learn from their ancestors' mistakes. The Second World War was one of these mistakes that should never be repeated. Thus, it's the perfect subject to teach about. Umbridge gave a little nod and took a note on her clipboard. Yes, of course. I was satisfied with that answer, Yugi told Atem, uncertain. I think it sounded really good. Atem, so did Yugi, but I don't really think she cares about what you answer. Thank you, very encouraging, Yugi remarked dryly. How long have you worked here? Umbridge asked. Nearly 2 weeks, Yugi said even more dryly. And if I'm not mistaken, you're a muggle? Dolores wondered, with a sugar-sweet smile that made Yugi feel even worse than he already did. Yes. Then if one of the students would turn against you, you'd be defenseless. You wouldn't be able to stop a fight among students either? She asked, clearly convinced that she had Yugi in a stranglehold. I might be a muggle by your standards, but I'm definitely not defenseless, Yugi said, a little smile appearing on his face. He had a suspicion on where this was heading, and he knew he would be able to turn Umbridge's words against her. If she'd ask for it, he would give it to her. I assume that you know you won't get far with martial arts, do you? What a fool. Do you think she realizes that without a wand, she'd be defenseless? They should train in martial arts as a precaution. They are way too dependent on their wands. Atem observed, worried. We can't tell the students that, Yugi remarked. No, but Rebecca could spread that knowledge, and so could Mr. Potter, Weasley, and Thomas. Miss Granger, too, Atem said. I believe you'd be surprised how much martial arts could work in a fight, even against a wizard or witch. But that was indeed not what I was referring to. My martial skills are very low. I don't doubt that I'd be able to deal with a student who decides to turn on me, though. The students were listening in on the conversation, and the 4 Gryffindors were worried. The rest simply confused. So, if I tried to curse you, you'd be able to stop me? Umbridge asked, scornful. That's what I claim, Yugi confirmed. Well, let's put it to the test. Flipindletria! She yelled, without giving Yugi a second to think. Atem had been more prepared for it. He took control and leapt to the side in even less time than Umbridge needed to pronounce the incantation. A shocked wave of whispers went through the classroom as an orange tornado hit the blackboard, which shattered into pieces. That you'll regret, Atem said, loud and clear. He straightened his back and his red eyes glared into Umbridge's old bulging ones. It was a good thing he stood with his back towards the students. They wouldn't notice the difference. He only wished he sounded more like Yugi. What are you going to do? Umbridge asked. You can't do anything. I told my dad things would go wrong if we had a muggle as a teacher. He'll make sure that we'll get rid of him, Draco Malfoy said to no one in particular. Oh, shut up, Malfoy, Tracy Davis called out to the blonde. You don't know what you're talking about. That is a more powerful version of the knockback jinx. The consequences of being hit with one can be terrible. Atem didn't have to turn around to know that every Gryffindor in the room was staring at her. He chose to ignore the tumult behind him for the moment and focused on Umbridge. That's what you think. Let's play a game. A Yamino game. A what? Umbridge wondered, frightened. A game. Certainly you know what that means. I'll explain the rules. Atem had changed from the prey to the predator. Umbridge knew that, and suddenly she regretted ever coming. They are simple. Atem continued. We aren't allowed to move our feet. We can say 2 words, and 2 words only to defeat our opponent. First one on his knees loses. 1 more. Suddenly, Umbridge started to laugh and interrupted him. You don't stand a chance! I accept! You should have let me finish, Atem said, his eyes burning with anger. 1 more thing, I said. The shadows will remove what we rely on most from our senses. What is going to do what? Umbridge said, suddenly not so gleeful anymore. Start, Atem called out, and the same instant he said so, Yugi's presence vanished. Atem had to calm himself. He knew it would happen since he relied on Yugi above anything else. But still. Umbridge lifted her wand to fire a curse, but then she noticed that she couldn't see nor feel her wand anymore. My wand! she called out and started waving with her hands, mistakenly throwing the wand towards Atem. Where's my wand? Atem just had to bend it down and pick it up. The moment he touched the wand, it became visible to Umbridge again. Right here. No! Umbridge screamed and ran forward towards Atem, but the shadows holding her feet wouldn't allow her to move, and she tripped, falling to her knees. Looks like I won, you pathetic cheat. You have a weak heart that desires power above anything else. May you be devoured by your own heart. Shh! The entrance door was busted open and a blonde girl ran in, panting heavily. No! Atem! She yelled in Japanese. Don't! Rebecca. Atem sighed and relinquished the shadows. Sorry, you're right. What are you doing here? He could feel Yugi's presence again the moment the shadow disappeared, and he felt relieved. I came to talk to you, Rebecca said, still talking Japanese so she wouldn't be understood. I was waiting outside but heard what happened. It took me ages to come through that door to keep you from doing something stupid. Do you know what could have happened? Thank you, Atem answered. You're right. I'd get myself in a tight spot, wouldn't I? Yes, you would. It's a lot easier to give yourself away here than anywhere else. Stop scolding me. Students are supposed to scold their teachers. Come to my office after this class and we'll talk properly there, Atem said calmly, still with his back towards the students and a shocked Umbridge at his feet. He wondered what would have happened if he actually had performed a shadow game on her. Rebecca nodded, though Atem didn't see that, turned around and left. The students were watching with question marks written over their faces. Atem relinquished his hold over Yugi and retreated to his room. Yugi turned around and gave the class a smile, smoothly continuing what Atem had started, though still slightly shocked over the darkness that had separated him unexpectedly from the ancient spirit. Mr. Malfoy, I'll see you after dinner, and this time don't count on me being called away. Then Yugi turned towards Umbridge, who got to her feet. Any more questions?